Airplanes are the fastest mode of transport that we have, and generally they are very safe and reliable, but that is about today. Many incidents have happened in the past, and some of them happened just because of one single mistake. Even today we are going to talk about one story just like this. On August 14, 2005 at 9 o'clock, Helios 522 departs from the Larnaca International Airport, and it was scheduled to stop at Athens International Airport at 10:45. The captain of the flight was Hans-Jürgen Merten, a 58-year-old German contract pilot. He had an experience of 35 years and an experience of 16,900 flight hours. His co-pilot was Pamos Charalambous, who had an experience of 7,549 flight hours. The chief flight attendant was 32 years old Luisa Vuteri, who had replaced a sick colleague. When this story ends, you will all know how lucky she was that she fell sick. Before I go right in, there is one more name I need to mention, a sort of hero to the story. Andreas Prodromou was a part of the crew that was on this flight. There was a total of 121 occupants, including 115 passengers and 6 of the crew members. Now let us get back to the story. 9:07 the flight took off from Larnaca International Airport. Scheduled timing was 9 o'clock, but the flight was running a little late. At 9:12, when the flight was at 12,040 feet, takeoff configuration alarm goes off. Now this alarm goes off when the flight is not ready for takeoff, but right now the flight was already in mid-air. At 9:14, pilots contacted ATC and reported an air conditioning problem. And when they were doing that, almost every alarm starts to go off. This left pilot in confusion as they weren't able to figure out what was going on. At 9:20, ATC lost contact with the flight. At that time, flight was at 28,900 feet. At 9:23, the flight was at 34,000 feet and was probably on autopilot. At 9:37, the flight entered the Athens Airways. Athens AYC also tried to contact the flight, but there wasn't any response. The flight was just circling Athens on autopilot. There was a continuous effort made by ATC to contact Flight 522, but they were all failed as there was no response from the cockpit. It was 10:45 and Flight 522 was scheduled to land at Athens Airport, but still, this flight was just circling Athens. At 10:54, Athens Joint Rescue Coordination Center and alerted them about possible renegade aircraft. At 11:05, 2 F-16 fighters depart Nia Ankeuls in search of Flight 522. At 11:24, they located the flight. At 11:32, one of the fighters goes near the cockpit window and tries to see what's going on. There were no signs of terrorism. Pilots were unconscious and oxygen masks were deployed. At 11:49, fighters see an individual walking inside the cockpit. Apparently, he was trying to regain control of the flight. At 11:50, the left engine stopped working due to a lack of fuel. 11:24, CVR recorded a total of 5 Mayday messages, which were sent in the hope of help. At 12 o'clock, right engine also stopped. At 12:04, an aircraft crashed into the mountains near Grammatiko, Greece. Shortly after the crash, rescue team was there, trying to get people out, but what they got were just dead bodies of the passengers and the crew. All 121 people who were on the flight died due to the crash. Now, this was the series of events that had happened with Flight 522, but why did this all happen? What was the reason behind the crash? Well, now let's dive into the investigation report. When the aircraft arrived at Larnaca from London earlier that morning, the previous flight crew had reported a frozen door seal and abnormal noises coming from the right aft service door. They requested a full inspection of the door. 33 to 34, the inspection was carried out by a ground engineer, who then performed a pressurization leak check. In order to carry out this check without requiring the aircraft's engines, the pressurization system was set to manual. However, the engineer failed to reset it to auto on completion of the test. After the aircraft was returned into service, the flight crew overlooked the pressurization system state on 3 occasions. During the pre-flight procedure, the after-start check, and the after-takeoff check. During these checks, no one on the flight deck noticed the incorrect setting. The aircraft took off at 9:07 with the pressurization system still set to manual and the aft outflow valve partially open. As the aircraft climbed, the pressure inside the cabin gradually decreased. As it passed through an altitude of 12,040 feet, the cabin altitude warning horn sounded. The warning should have prompted the crew to stop climbing, but it was misidentified by the crew as a takeoff configuration warning, which signals that the aircraft is not ready for takeoff and can only sound on the ground. The alert sound is identical for both warnings. In the next few minutes, several warning lights on the overhead panel in the cockpit illuminated. One or both of the equipment cooling warning lights came on to indicate low airflow through the cooling fan, accompanied by the master caution light. This light gets illuminated when all the systems are getting overheated. The passenger oxygen light illuminated when at an altitude of approximately 18,000 feet. The oxygen masks in the passenger cabin automatically deployed. Shortly after the cabin altitude warning sounded, the captain radioed the Helios Operations Center and reported the takeoff configuration warning on and cooling equipment normal and alternate offline. He then spoke to the ground engineer and repeatedly stated that the cooling ventilation fan lights were off. The engineer asked, "Can you confirm that the pressurization panel is set to auto?" However, the captain, already experiencing the onset of hypoxia's initial symptoms, disregarded the question and instead asked in reply, "Where are my equipment cooling circuit breakers?" This was the last communication with the aircraft. The aircraft continued to climb until it leveled off at FL 340, approximately 34,000 feet. Between 9:30 and 9:40, Nicosia ATC repeatedly attempted to contact the aircraft without success. At 9:37, the aircraft passed from Cyprus Flight Information Region into Athens FIR without making contact with Athens ATC. 19 attempts to contact the aircraft between 10:12 and 10:50 also met with no response. And at 10:40, the aircraft entered the holding pattern for Athens Airport at the KEA VOR, still at FL 340. It remained in the holding pattern under control of the autopilot for the next 70 minutes. Two F-16 fighter aircraft from the Hellenic Air Force 111th Combat Wing were scrambled from Anchialos Air Base to establish visual contact. They intercepted the passenger jet at 11:24 and observed that the first officer was slumped motionless at the controls and the captain's seat was empty. They also reported that oxygen masks were dangling in the passenger cabin. At 11:49, flight attendant Andreas Prodromou entered the cockpit and sat down in the captain's seat, having remained conscious by using a portable oxygen supply. His girlfriend, Haris Charalambous, was also seen in the cockpit helping Prodromou try to control the aircraft. Prodromou held a UK commercial pilot license but was not qualified to fly the Boeing 737. Prodromou waved at the F-16s very briefly, but almost as soon as he entered the cockpit, the left engine flamed out due to fuel exhaustion, and the plane left the holding pattern and started to descend. Crash investigators concluded that Prodromou's experience was insufficient for him to be able to gain control of the aircraft under the circumstances. However, Prodromou succeeded in banking the plane away from Athens and towards a rural area as the engines flamed out. There were no ground casualties. 10 minutes after the loss of power from the left engine, the right engine also flamed out, and just before 12:04, the aircraft crashed into hills near Grammatiko, 40 kilometers from Athens, killing all 121 passengers and crew on board. This was a tragedy that happened just because of a simple switch that was on manual. Yes, they should have checked it, but this was just a simple mistake that took all 121 people to their doom. We all can just hope that these people are at peace now and nothing of this sort happens again. Well, this was it for today. I can't figure out who can be blamed for this accident. No one knows who was the villain of the story, but one thing is certain, that Andreas Prodromou is the hero of the story, as if he hadn't done what he did, there would be many more casualties than that. The reason that he was able to stay conscious and do what he did is that he used to be a scuba diver, and they have a lot of experience in holding their breath and going into high-pressure areas. Now you guys go down into the comment section and tell us who would you blame for this accident. Don't forget to like and share. Do it or the bravery of Andreas Prodromou, and do subscribe to the channel to get regular videos like this. This is it for today. Until next time, bye-bye.